Hello, podcast fam. I am thrilled to share some exciting news. My book, So Grow Lead, is officially live on Amazon. This book is more than just my story of starting a nonprofit and building a peanut butter factory in Malawi. Though trust me, the ups and downs of that journey are worth the read. It's also packed with practical strategies to help nonprofit leaders like you tackle challenges with clarity, courage, and a whole lot of heart. If you've ever wondered how to turn your vision into reality, navigate the inevitable hurdles, and build something meaningful, whether in your organization or in your own life, this book is for you. I'd be so grateful for your support in spreading the word. Grab your copy of So Grow Lead in the show notes and on Amazon today. Let's keep sowing seeds of impact together. Welcome to the Lead with Heart podcast, which is dedicated to nonprofit leaders who are passionate about making a difference. I'm your host, Haley Cooper, and I'm thrilled to have you join us on a journey of growth, inspiration, and transformation. At Lead with Heart, we believe that leading with heart means embracing empathy, compassion, and authenticity in every aspect of our work. It's about putting people first, fostering genuine connections, and creating a positive impact that goes beyond numbers and metrics. In the nonprofit world, it can often feel like we're carrying the weight of the world on our shoulders. The challenges are immense, and the road can be lonely. But here, you're not alone. This podcast is a community where we support each other, share our stories, and learn together. Each episode will dive into personal and professional development topics tailored specifically for nonprofit leaders. From innovative fundraising strategies and effective team management to self-care practices and leadership insights, we're here to provide you with practical strategies that you can apply to your life and work. My goal is to empower you, elevate your leadership, and engage your heart in all that you do. I want to help you navigate the unique challenges of the nonprofit sector with confidence and resilience, so you can continue to create meaningful change in the world. So whether you're driving to a meeting, taking a break, or winding down for the day, tune in and join us on this journey. Together, we'll discover what it truly means to lead with heart. Thank you for being here. Let's dive in. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Lead with Heart podcast. This is your host, Haley Cooper. And today I have the incredible honor of speaking with Christa, the Chief Technology Officer of Charity Water. Since its inception in 2006, Charity Water has been on a relentless mission to end the global water crisis. Fueled by optimism, collaborative efforts with local partners, and the generosity of supporters, their aim is nothing short of ensuring universal access to clean water within our lifetime. And Christa brings a wealth of experience to her role, consistently implying a multidisciplinary approach that leverages data and technology to drive better decisions, products, and delivery. Her strong focus on innovation and mission-driven work makes her a standout leader in the nonprofit sector. I am so excited to have you here, Christa. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here and chat with you today.
So I always like to ask this question before we dive deep into all the nitty-gritties of your role. What's your background and how did you get to Charity Water and the role that you're in today?
Ooh, I feel like it's been a long road to get to the role I'm in today, but I will start maybe at the beginning, but the beginning being when I left college. When I left college, I had gone to school with the idea that I would be working in a space, a mission-oriented space. And I left California. I was born and raised in California and went to Washington, D.C. to intern. And I interned at a nonprofit and did that, as many interns do in Washington, D.C. without being paid, and realized that my dream of working in a space like this was probably going to be pretty far away from me, because getting started in this space and not being of a set of means that would allow me to work in a place where I wouldn't be earning money was just not in the cards for me. And so I had to make a super difficult choice, and I came home, and it changed the trajectory of my career. And I ended up moving into the for-profit space at that time and really focused on technology and building up a big career in technology and specifically in startups. But that feeling had never left me. As I was going through the world of startups, every time I moved on to a new location, I found myself searching for getting closer to something that had a mission again. And so then I was working for mission-based startups. And the last time I wanted to make a change, I started looking at B Corps. And then I finally said to myself, what am I doing here? I just need to go and go the whole route and find the mission that speaks for me and go search for the right nonprofit to be a part of. So that is how I came full circle back to nonprofits again. And I think it was nice, like later in my career, I was able to really look at the sector as a whole and see how they were using technology and really zero in where I was going to focus on those teams and those organizations that I knew were really wanting to use technology to make a difference in some capacity. And I figured there must be a group of nonprofits out there who could use someone with a lot of startup experience and bringing teams through growth and change. And I came across Charity Water, and that's how I landed here today.
I love the story of your trajectory. And you don't really hear the word chief technology officer in nonprofits. Obviously, Charity Water has its own unique entity. So on a high level, obviously, I don't want to know like your job description because who really has a job description in nonprofits, right? It's other tasks is needed. But what role does a chief technology officer play in a nonprofit organization?
Yeah, so we can play a lot of different roles. At Charity Water in particular, it means leading the product and engineering and data organizations and the IT organizations. So it's leading the whole suite of what technology impacts in a holistic manner, and then really setting ourselves in two different capacities. And one capacity is to enable the other parts of the organization to be able to do all the things that they need to do through technology. So whether that's fundraising or whether that's our programs team, figuring out where we can apply technology at the right place and at the right time to help those teams scale and help them do the jobs that they need to do every single day. And then the other side of it is the product side of it, where we're actually developing experiences for donors in particular. And so if we think about the website as an experience, we're thinking about that as a place where we're introducing people to the mission of Charity Water and hopefully cultivating a desire to be a part of the Charity Water community and become a donor. And so we do a lot of work around designing what those experiences look like and how we deliver on the promise of our model and impact reporting and all of those aspects of what we do.
Yeah, I think technology plays such an important role in the work that we do. And I love this idea of creating a donor experience. It really is like how people give. So how do you communicate with your donors and understand what that experience is? And then how do you leverage technology to create that experience? And I'm assuming it could be ever evolving.
For sure, yeah.
What aspects of technology play a role in creating that donor experience that makes donors come back again and again?
So I think it starts with introducing ourselves, right? And making sure that we're introducing ourselves in the best way possible. So one aspect of that is how technology supports brand awareness and marketing overall. I don't think there's any nonprofit out there that can't afford to not do a little bit of marketing to make sure that folks know about the mission, whatever the very important mission is. And in our case, the important mission of clean water, and getting the word out and making sure that's happening. And so there's tons of technology, marketing tech that comes into play around that technology can support. And then ideally, that first touch point of introducing, you want to make sure that someone wants to learn more. And ideally, when they want to learn more, they're going to come to your website and they're going to try to learn more, and making sure that we have an experience that's set up, not to simply try to funnel people through that first donation. I think sometimes we can get caught up in trying to do that, but really instead educate and spark curiosity about what is actually happening in the world of clean water, but in particular for our case, and really get people asking the question of how does this impact humans every single day, and what can I do to make a difference? So by the time that we're actually asking for a donation, we feel like there's already enough interest there and hopefully enough desire to want to be a part of the solution. Then after that, it comes down to retention and really making sure that donors feel that their donation, which for so many people can be such a huge part of what they choose to do. And you want to make sure that donors feel like they've had the impact that they were hoping to have, no matter how big or how small that donation is. You want to be able to deliver on the promise that you made that you were going to do something with that donation that helps somebody. And in this particular case, we'll focus very deeply on what it means to say, here was the journey of your donation, and here's the community that it landed in, and how that community has changed from before clean water to after clean water. And technology is, we try to take a digital first approach to everything we do. And so technology becomes a big part of how that donation flows through the system and eventually gets connected back to a water project and gets delivered back to the donor.
Yeah, I love that. And I want, before we talk about donor engagement, because I know a lot of nonprofits struggle with donor retention, on the website, are there key things that if a listener is listening to this and they're like, well, our website isn't optimal, are there key things that people should think about when setting up a website and making it optimal for that donor to go on that journey?
I think so. I think the things that we focus on that I think are useful to focus on is always making sure that your brand is front and center and your product is the mission, right? I come, like, prior to this, I was 7 years in e-commerce, and showcasing your product is a big part of making sure that people understand the connection with what they're seeing in a digital context. And so the mission is the product. And so you want to showcase your mission in all the ways that someone may want to explore it, whether it's the history of your organization, whether it's transparency in your financials, whether it's the stories of impact that you can share at a broader scale. Most visitors to the website who are arriving for the first time, who may have heard of Charity Water from either an ad campaign or through word of mouth, are really here to learn something. And so structuring your information on your website in a way that helps facilitate what folks want to learn about first is, I think, the best way to approach that overall information hierarchy. And then as they're more engaged with the content that they're seeing, this is a moment. Then it's a great moment to present an ask and say, do you want to be a part of the solution? But it shouldn't be something you necessarily lead with right from the outset.
Yeah, and I love that idea of leading them to the ask. And we know that just universally, and when a donor gives a first time donation, they're only 20% likely to give a second donation. And there's only a 40% retention rate in nonprofits. And that means people are doing all of this work to get them to the donation page, to get them to give, and then there's nothing afterwards. And it's all that hard work, the 60% is going away. And so
Right.
You've obviously been a trailblazer in innovating marketing strategies to raise awareness and secure and retain funds. Could you share some key lessons you've learned about keeping donors engaged and informed in your mission?
Yes, I think where Charity Water has really excelled is always creating that follow-up touch point in how we actually make sure that transparency that we promise is followed up on. And so we publish every project that gets deployed today. We publish it on the website and make it available for any user to dig in and understand. And we share stories, on the ground stories from our teams that are working in different parts of the world. And we try to make sure that we're always bringing back that human connection to the donation. And I think that's a big part of engagement, whether you're using email to do it or whether you're using a follow-up note of some kind, or we just recently had a thank you campaign. There are so many ways to think about how to make donors recognize that you appreciate what they've contributed, no matter how big or small. I think that's just such an important aspect of it, of no matter how big or small, you want to make sure that the donor knows that you haven't forgotten about them and that their donation really made an impact. And I think that's impact reporting feels like such a generic term across the board in so many cases, and it has to be made to feel personal. And I think if you can develop that personal connection between the people who are impacted and the people who donated to help drive that impact, it's really fostering that connection that I think drives retention and engagement long term. So focusing on the stories that are coming out, all of those stories are so important to help drive that feeling of human connection.
Yeah, anything on the personal level, that's where technology comes in, right? You can automate and personalize things to make it feel like you're speaking to me. Like I receive Charity Water's emails and I feel like you're talking to me. I know that it's going out to a bunch of people, but it feels personal. It feels like I've made a specific impact. And I think that's where technology can come in and help facilitate some of that personalization to make donors feel like they've made an impact in the mission.
For sure. And doing this at scale, I think, really requires technology. Charity Water was so committed to this early on that manual reports would be prepared for donors and sent out. And I think that's very common. But when you're trying to do it for any donor at any donation size, you really need to think about a technical solution that's going to enable you to take that donation, understand where it landed and how that donation was eventually used, and in order to be able to share that back with the donor. It would be very difficult to not use technology to do that at scale. And so any nonprofit that is thinking about growth long-term and being able to deliver on those promises to a growing body of donors will have to be thinking about technology to make that happen.
Yeah. And you mentioned a lot about storytelling. And I know a lot of nonprofits struggle with this, especially serving vulnerable populations where you have to keep the dignity and confidentiality of the people you're serving while also making it personal, because donors, like you said, want to be connected to people. So in terms of storytelling, and especially when you're working I worked for an international organization, and it was really hard to make people feel and see what it felt like to be on the ground, to experience it with me, right? I could only tell you so much, but if you hadn't actually been there, it's a little bit harder to experience. So how does Charity Water approach storytelling? Do you have a guideline, a policy? Like, how do you approach it when you're serving people in an international capacity?
Yeah, so I think one of the most important pillars of Charity Water's storytelling is to lead with hope. And leading with hope and showing what can happen with even the smallest of donations, the change that's possible, and then following through on that. So don't just lead with hope and say it's possible, but actually follow through on the completed story of that hope. I think that is just such a key fundamental pillar of the storytelling. And you're right, it can be easy. It's often easier to take a different path, but to tell the story of hope and dignity and sharing that people around the world are just like us. They have the same needs. You need clean water. I need clean water. It's no different from anybody else needing clean water, right? And sometimes we just lose sight of how important clean water is in our everyday lives. And so trying to build those touch points where we can ask folks to imagine for 5 minutes what it might be like without clean water. How much stress would you feel? How would your day be organized differently if you didn't have clean water in front of you? And so trying to build empathy through that type of connection and then making it very clear that this is a solvable problem. So there's only progress ahead of us in this. There's no technical obstacle to making this happen. And that ends up translating into a story of hope and possibility, not of one where it feels overwhelming. It can be inspiring instead. And so that's where the brand really tries to focus our storytelling overall.
Yeah, I think that's so powerful. And when you're talking about marketing, when we're talking about storytelling, it starts with internal clarity. So internal clarity helps build that donor confidence because then every single person across the organization understands the vision, understands their role. They're able to go out and communicate that to the world, right? And so how do you balance the vision and communication and collaboration to ensure your team remains aligned and motivated towards your mission?
So I think we don't have a lot of challenges with the team being aligned and motivated with the mission. I feel like we have one of those missions where, and we talk about this, it's something we can all agree on. And this is just one of those, but taking that feeling, the feeling that we all have internally and sharing it with the world, that's part of what we do because we truly believe this is something that we can all agree on. And then we have other aspects of it that we try to keep things very simple, and it makes the narrative around this really easy to share, both internally and externally. Internally, we can ask ourselves, what are we doing every day? We're helping to bring clean water to those who don't have clean water. That is just as easy of a communication internally as it is externally. And then if we ask ourselves, why do we have this mission? We have an answer for that. It's because water changes everything. It changes everything about economic opportunity. It changes educational opportunities. It changes health outcomes. There's so many follow-on impacts of clean water. And so we talk about that internally, which makes it very easy to talk about that externally. And these through lines of how we just all understand the problem is an important aspect of anyone working in the organization today. And we can all, I can talk to you about it. Someone from our programs team can talk about it. And the message is simple and it's clear. It makes it hopefully easy for everyone else to understand just that this problem is not a hard problem to understand. We don't have to jump through a lot of hoops. It's really just a decision at the end of the day. And I think that makes it helps bring a sense of clarity to the team, both internally, and allows us to communicate with clarity externally.
Yeah, I think that's such an important point. I'm actually writing an email about this, about how we tend to overcomplicate things and we want to over communicate our mission by adding all of this stuff that we do. And it gets confusing. Donors are like, wait, but what do you actually do? So it's such an important message. The simpler, the better.
Right.
Then people will have that clarity externally and understand how to invest in your mission. They'll understand why they need to and how they can be a part of the mission.
It's so true. And it comes from such a good place. I think people who work at nonprofits, myself included, have this transparency imperative built into their DNA where we want to share everything, every last nuance. And sometimes for the donor, all of those nuances just muddy the water and it changes things. And so, yes, keeping that simplistic clarity of message where even though can be some level of nuance in the story that you're telling, it doesn't have to be detailed for every donor out there.
Yeah. And, something you mentioned when we were off screen was about developing leaders. And obviously, that's my favorite topic. That's why I have podcasts. So I would love to know how Charity Water invests in their employees and developing leaders.
So I'll speak just from myself in terms of what is important to me first, and then maybe talk about Charity Water overall. I think for me, developing leaders is really about providing the right frameworks for leaders to operate in. And so an example of that is, what does growth look like for a leader? And really having that clearly laid out. And so we've done quite a bit of work identifying what growth can look like for individual contributors on the team, as well as for managers on the team, and really zeroing in on what those paths of growth can look like and supporting folks. Like, we have books, so many books. The team is constantly doing various book clubs around how we can improve our communication styles. There's different books that make the rounds at different points, what different leadership characteristics we want to emulate. That's a big part of it. Providing professional development opportunities. We have professional development stipends that we provide for the employees, things of that nature. And that, in conjunction with the overall career track information that we try to provide, will help the idea that we're growing people, not just for their time at Charity Water, but for their time in their career, right? Because not everyone will grow to the peak of their career at Charity Water, but that shouldn't matter to us. What we care about is the human, and making sure that human is prepared for whatever their future holds in store for them from a career perspective. So we have, yes, the professional development stipends that we provide. We have the career tracks we provide, and we have just the more organic support that we provide each other around this.
Ooh, I want to double tap on that, because that is such an important distinction, that you're not just growing people for Charity Water, but you're growing people for their careers. And I think with that mindset, like I always say, we're making this sector a better place, right? If we're going to train our people well and they go off, like one of my mentors at a local organization and longtime family friend was like, I know that I'm making the sector a better place. Like, I'm training them now, and I know that I'm going to hand them off knowing that they're going to do excellent at another organization. And I think that's so important.
I agree with you. We're so proud when someone outgrows us. And this is just the nature of any organization, that if you reach a certain size, your organization is going to be a certain size. And some folks in that organization are going to outpace your growth for whatever reason. And if they can leave Charity Water and take their experience to another nonprofit and take it forward, we have nothing but joy for that kind of outcome. Because if we were a part of that person's journey, and hopefully a positive part of that person's journey, that I feel like is a success.
Imagine a fundraising partner that not only helps you raise more money, but also supports you in retaining your donors. A partner that helps you raise funds both online and on location, so you can grow your impact faster. That's DonorBox, a comprehensive suite of tools, services, and resources that give fundraisers just like you a custom solution to tackle your unique challenges, helping you achieve the growth and sustainability your organization needs, helping you help others. Visit donorbox.org to learn more. Yes, definitely. Well, as a woman in a significant tech leadership role, and I was just having someone on the podcast that is empowering people to take on more tech roles, but specifically women, what challenges have you faced, and how do you work to empower other women in tech?
I would say the majority of the challenges I faced were probably earlier in my career. I feel like we've been on a trajectory now for some time. When I started my career in technology, there were actually quite a few women in technology. And then we had the first dot-com boom, and things changed, and the dynamics of teams and the makeup of teams really started to change. And then I became quite used to a dynamic where there were not a lot of other women on the team. And so those of us who we're out there, had to work very hard to support each other overall. But I feel like we're coming out of, and maybe that's not true of everywhere, at least it's been true of my personal experience, and coming to a place where women in technology are more visible again than they may have been 15 years ago. And this is, I think, that's not to say there's not still work to do, but I see the progress and the trajectory in my own experience and my own career. And I think that's probably been one of the bigger challenges, is just seeing that change and shift over time. And as a woman in technology, you have to adjust, right? I think many of us are good at adjusting to whatever and adapting to the environment, right? And so having to adapt, and then being in a place where prior to Charity Water, I was working with a team that was all women dominated, including the executive team. And that was just a moment where I was able to say to myself, we've come full circle again. And the challenges are different. Giving women visibility in technology, I think the way I personally try to do this is I think it's super important to make myself available from a mentorship standpoint. And so I have a network that I try to stay in touch with and make sure that if there's folks in that network, and women especially, who need mentoring, I'm available to them. And I try to be very responsive to women who reach out to me in particular and ask me for just maybe even a history of my background and how I think about things. I try to be very responsive to that because I know I had some great mentors early on in my career, and they meant everything to me. And if I can provide that to other women and other professionals in general, it's an important part of what I try to do on a personal level.
Yeah. And I feel like that's such a gift, because when people offer to be mentorship, you don't take that lightly. When it's such a gift that you can give back and help mentor people that want to aspire to be like you. So what advice would you give to women aspiring to leadership positions in technology?
I think the advice I would give is try to write down the kind of leader that you want to be. I think that sometimes we get lost in just thinking about the position that we want or the level we want to achieve. And I feel like that's secondary to first trying to be the type of leader that you want to be. And so if you are aspiring to leadership, it's an important thing to take the time to say, what type of leader do I want to be? And then be honest with yourself about where there are gaps. I know I aspired to be a certain kind of leader, and it was an important step for me to recognize where I had gaps. And let's say it's an insecurity moment, or it's a defensiveness moment, or it's a moment around your communication style, like anything around those types of things. Or maybe you just don't feel comfortable running a team yet for one reason or another. Just identify where the gaps are and hopefully just figure out a way to start working on those. Because as you start working on those, leadership opportunities will begin to open up to you because people will recognize that you're actually working on these things. And so that's one of the things that I would say is really focus on what type of leader you want to be, and then identify the gaps and start working on those and start trying to put them into practice every single day. Because as soon as you start putting them into practice, people start to notice, and you'll be surprised at what leadership opportunities start to open up once they see that happening.
And then reach out to you to work on those leadership goals, right?
Yeah, exactly.
You can help them navigate their focus and how to fill in those gaps.
Exactly. I'm happy. Like I said, I'm always happy to mentor if someone reaches out.
So looking ahead, what are the next big goals for Charity Water, and how do you see your role evolving to meet these new challenges and opportunities?
So, I mean, for the next big thing, in terms of the next big iteration we want to make from a donor, I'll touch on a couple different things. From a donor experience perspective, we're really looking to bring the next level of donor engagement around our impact and storytelling in a way that I was talking about scale earlier, really trying to scale that in a way where we can start telling much more specific stories to our donors overall. And so we're working on that in terms of overall donor experience. In the world of water programs, I wouldn't want to necessarily speak for them, but I think what's one of the great innovations that's happening over there is going beyond the standard metrics that exist in the industry around WASH and really diving in on a new scale of metrics that focus on, they're called the HWISE metrics, and they focus on well-being and how water impacts well-being over time, and really diving deep there and innovating there overall. And so I would say on both sides, we're always focused on both the donors and the teams and the communities that we're impacting.
I love that. And if people want to follow along with these goals and learn more about the work that you do, where can they find you?
Well, you can always find me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty easy to find there, and people reach out to me there and I will respond. And then I'm also Christa at charitywater.org.
Well, thank you so much, Christa, for being here. I absolutely enjoyed this conversation, and I so appreciate the work you do to bring clean water to the world.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This was really fun.
If you have valued these stories or learned something from what you've heard, please share this podcast episode or follow me on LinkedIn. Thank you so much for your support, and together we can build a better community and world.